just time to celebrate what we have and what we already love. The Hazing, Biozombie, The Beyond, Texas Chainsaw Massacre, House by the Cemetery, Jason X, The Night of the Living Dead, Captive Wild Woman, Decad, The Empty Man, Exorcist 3, Cat People, Friday the 13th, The Final Chapter, The Haunting of Julia, Hereditary, Black Sunday, Ringu. Forgive me if I don't really know what to say about Alien. There's been there's been 40 years of discussion around this movie, and it's not going to stop anytime soon. Every possible angle has been delved into by people that are far smarter about film than I am. All I can say is it's my number 8 favorite film of all time for the most immediate reason. And that's that Alien gets under your skin, shocks you, holds you in incredible suspense, makes you feel panic, and never really resolves itself. And I think that leaves you really unsettled. Not to start at the end, but that final sequence of Ripley getting ready to go into hypersleep and then being asleep in the capsule, do you feel like she's safe? Because I don't. And I think there's good reason for that. I think that the title of this film is probably the most perfect title in film history. Everything that's scary in this movie is scary because it is alien. It's completely unknowable to the human experience. And damn, that on paper must have been a hell of a thing to try and sell to the studio, right? Well, they didn't. They wanted to make a schlocky B movie about a space alien, but make it on a big budget. Everything that happened after that, every consequential decision, just made what could have been a cheap piece of schlock into one of the greatest films ever made. And that was because they had endless ambition. They used money the right way. They opened up a story rather than close it down. Usually with horror films, having resources becomes a problem because if you can put anything on screen, then you don't have to use all your faculties to suggest. And suggested horror, because that's the basis of the uncanny, usually works better. Alien still manages to be uncanny, but it does so by being unknowable. It's the ideas that really scare you in Alien. It's not the jump scares, it's not the body horror. It has those things. And those shock sequences work better than any other of their contemporaries. But it's really that aspect of how do you defeat something that you can't wrap your mind around? Today, it's probably not too big of a deal to think of a monster with acid for blood, but at the time, that idea was deeply, deeply unsettling. Also, a creature that changed, evolved to match its surroundings like a chameleon, but its surroundings were biomechanical. The fact that it had human DNA, so it was bipedal, but was imitating its surroundings as far as tubes and machinery. Nothing had ever been like this before, and that's why I wonder if you first saw Alien after the sequels were out, if you hold Alien in the regard it deserves. Because the sequels, even the ones I like, all kind of make the alien not alien. They make it a monster that we know. And that's a sin. That's a horrible sin because that original experience when you didn't know what the monster even really looked like, it was terrifying. The cast is all great. And you know, the thing is, we focus on Sigourney Weaver probably too much. And again, I think the sequels have made us really Ripley centric, but everyone is so good in this film. It's an ensemble piece with a very limited cast. Everyone gets time. There's a reason why every member of Alien is recognizable and we can spit out their names. That's not true of any of the sequels. It's not true of most films, period. I would argue that it's easier to go down the litany of names of the characters in Alien than it is in even a film like The Thing, which is very beloved. But Alien is especially provocative about giving us these characters that we identify with that all believe different things, but at different points we can kind of side with all of them. I don't think there's any of them that are wrong all the time, except maybe Ash, but he's programmed to be wrong all the time, right? And I mean wrong as in immoral. I think this is a film that also doesn't fall into the trope of, oh, characters have to do really dumb things for it to be scary. They're trying to survive, and while they make mistakes, those mistakes are very reasonable mistakes. Well, a big criticism today is, why would you put your face right over an alien egg? I think it's easy to say that once you know what's going to happen, but we didn't even really know that they were eggs or that the thing inside was alive. It was all so exotic that there was no way to know. That first sequence with the face hugger was unbelievable at the time it came out. It was a moment of sheer, irretractable panic. And the cut that happens immediately afterwards is so brilliant because we're racing. We want to know what happened. We want context. And we're being denied that for it's probably about 2 minutes before we really understand the context of what happened and where the story was leading because of it. Also, the chestburster sequence, I think that was a little easier to see coming, but you couldn't have imagined that you were going to see it. Movies have a habit of skirting scenes like that, especially back then. Today, they don't skirt it, but it's all CGI, so it doesn't have any impact. But just a moment ago in the movie, by the way, the facehugger dies and they find its corpse. We don't get to see that transactional plot moment, right? They define the aftermath of it. So it sets us up to believe that whatever's going to happen, we're not going to see. We're going to see the aftermath of. So when we see it on screen and it's violent and it is bright and it's starkly lit, like it's not something in the shadows. It's all there. Man, that is a moment for the ages and has never been reproduced in any of the sequels simply because you can't do it twice when it was the first time it was done in the first film, right? To do it again misses the point of why they did it in the first film. It was one of those things like, we want to do something that's never been done before, and you're not going to believe our audacity. Once we see a chest burster emerge from a chest, that's done. From an impact standpoint, it's over. I'm not going to talk about the sequels really at all here because I got to tell you, I think the sequels have diminished the original in the eyes of everyone who saw the original after the sequels or shortly thereafter because they were already made. The original film really deserves to be seen on its own and be given a lot of runway before you go on to any of the sequels. That's the way to really appreciate it the most. Fortunately, it's a ever shrinking number of people who will get to experience it that way. Those of us of a certain age, were very fortunate. I encountered Alien for the first time on television, so it was slightly cut. Although I would argue that that cut is not, it's just not very truncated at all. Most everything is still there. There's just a few shots that are missing. And that's the magic of Alien, is that its violence is present even when you try to scale back the blood. Now, when I was growing up, I'd heard about the film before I saw it. So some of the storyline had been spoiled for me, but the impact hadn't been affected. I remember hearing on the school bus about this movie, and I desperately wanted to see it, but I, had missed that first television viewing. It was on too late. But a couple years later, I got my opportunity, and it just blew me away. It was everything I'd hoped it'd be, which was kind of the opposite of what used to happen. I used to have these films built up around the playground, and then you'd see them and be like, it was good, but it wasn't what I had in my head for the last 8 months. Alien was more than its reputation, and it still is. One of the things I remember being discussed about the film quite a bit in those days in the monster magazines is that in a lot of ways it is a adaptation and expansion of H.P. Lovecraft's At the Mountains of Madness. And that becomes really very clear later when they ran out of ideas for and in Alien versus Predator, they literally have the pyramid under the Arctic ice. So they just kind of blatantly lay that foundational inspiration on the table for you. And that's the thing, like is the alien a Shoggoth? It really could be. We know they came from space. We know that they are completely alien to us. We know that we can't possibly understand them. All that really could be the backstory of the alien. We don't know. And not knowing, I always say, is more powerful than knowing. In horror, the idea that is vague enough to worm its way into our brain will produce far, far more effect than those that are explained to us. One of the reasons I think that prequels in horror are almost always a bad idea. Not always, but most of the time. Alien is a singular experience, a brilliant moment in time where a big budget was the right answer for the right story at the right time. A film that dresses up as if it's a science fiction film so it could get that Star Wars production money. But its intent really was to channel things like Planet of the Vampires or The Thing from Another World. But to take those titles and do something poetic and literate and strong and classic. I never saw Alien without seeing what I considered to be a film classic on screen. I never saw it any other way. And every time I've subsequently seen it, whether on revival screenings, which I'm a sucker, you put it on the screen, I'm going to consider going, or at home on Laserdisc or VHS or Blu-ray or DVD or 4K. I've owned this movie a lot. Every time I watch it, that magic and that classic sensibility, that sense that we'll never get something in this very specific subgenre that's as good as this movie.